So then you built the barn, your store barn, in '83. You said.
Right.
And then you.
I remember '84.
'84. So that would have been like the end of your high school years, right?
Yeah, I was actually I was in college at the time.
Didn't you do like Bible studies in there and dances and stuff like that?
We didn't do Bible studies in there, but we did do. All my college friends came out once the barn was built, and we did some of the first hoedowns there. First hoedowns up here, as I remember, were in there. Well, actually, not quite true, because the first ones we did in high school over at the Bauman barn on the other side of the Glen. And so the Baumans had sold their apple barn that they hadn't used for 30, 40 years at that time. And so we went in and cleaned it out, got the push brooms and moved out some of the old equipment and old boxes and things and built ourselves a little stage. And we had a whole bunch of high school friends come up. We had at least 30, 40 at a time. Yeah. So
is that when you had hot
cider band?
So that was in high school that you started that.
So we'd play, Dad would call, and it was fun. We'd get all sorts. We'd get football players and
really?
Yeah, college band kids and all that.
Was that kind of music more common? Because I feel like
no.
Okay, so it's still unique back then.
We're still unique
okay.
back then.
So then so in the timeline, kind of where we're at now, this is around the time when you're going off to college.
Right.
When was that?
83.
To Azusa, and then you graduated
87.
in 87. Okay. And then you guys got the barn in 88.
When you say the barn, you mean the bigger Riley's barn?
Yeah.
No, in the end of '86.
Oh, so you were still in college. Oh,
I was still in college.
I forgot.
I was in my junior year. Yep.
So your mom got married when you were still in college?
We were juniors in college.
Oh.
We just finished our junior year and got married. Still had a year left to go. Couldn't wait.
So you commuted from up here?
We did. Wow. I did. My last year I commuted from here.
That's a long way.
Yep, it was a long way to go.
Wow. So then got the barn in '86, and that was just like overflowing, right, with trees and everything?
It actually wasn't that much. Dad had more trees. We had more trees on this 12 acres than there was on all of that 200.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
but like trees that were growing through the barn, right? It was just almost completely dilapidated by that.
Yeah,
point?
it was part of the old Wilshire homestead property from back in the turn of the century, from the 1880s, basically. Dad had been talking to Dean Cundy, the filmmaking friend who owned this piece where our house is now, and about what it would be like to expand what they'd started on the small property, and said, wouldn't this be great to move this next door to all this land that was basically abandoned? Nobody was ever over there. Trees were growing through the packing house. It's old broken boxes, an old packing line that was still partly set up.
Oh,
in there.
really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
And, but it was just sort of rat infested and whatever else. You'd go over there and bang around as kids, climbing the rafters, that sort of thing. Had an old packing line belt drive system up in the rafters that powered everything.
That's still there,
Still
right?
Still there. And anyway, they've been talking about that, and then you heard that somebody was looking to buy it, right?
Well, they threatened to tear it down because you kids were going over there and playing in it, running along the rafters in the top, with no
oh my gosh.
scooting along the rafters like a bunch of rats. And they said, we're going to tear that down because it's a liability. We're afraid that one of your kids is going to get killed over there. And so I said, well, why don't we just buy it from you? And so Dean did up a rendering of a kind of like a Disneyland kind of a deal, And I shopped it around to my clients, and
It's descendants of Wilshire's owned it.
Wilshire's owned it still?
Yeah.
Okay.
And ultimately, my dad bought it. And so there was a lot of reasons to buy it. There's a lot of impetus to buy it. And so it went through. And Devin became the backbone of the whole thing. I mean, my dad says, what am I going to do with this land, Dennis? And I said, well, Devin will take care of it for you. He'll be the on-site man.
And Scott had wanted to come up, so Uncle Scott. So that's when
Scott lived with us for a while.
Scott and I partnered up and formed a corporation. And so it's pretty much Shelley and I and Scott that did it for the first few years. And Scott and Benita got married. So it was the four of us for a long time operating that.
Which was not your guys' life expectation at all, right? Because you were thinking about doing like political journalism.
Yeah, I was basically looking at, that's what I wanted to do, was write for, do what a lot of these people that are bloggers now, right, on current events and politics from a Christian perspective, basically.
And Mom wanted to be a teacher, right?
She'd gone to school to be a teacher, so we both got our degrees in things that were totally unrelated to the farm. So.
And then you guys started tours pretty much right off the bat, or did that take a few years to kind of get into that?
No, that was pretty quick. It really started over at Mom and Dad's parcel
With the
when
field trips and stuff.
teachers would come up, and they'd come up with their family, and they'd pick apples and they'd make apple cider. And I think it was the first time it was a teacher that said, "Boy, I'd love to bring my class up here."
Right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so they did that, and it was basically, we didn't charge per person, because at the time you could press a gallon of cider for $4 a gallon.
Wow.
And so they would come up and they had to commit to buying 2 gallons of cider, I think is what it was.
To get a tour?
So you get a tour for $8 for the group.
I mean, even with the inflation, I still think that was a little.
It was a little ridiculous. You got to make a gallon of cider while you're here, and then we'll walk you around.
You can't leave without paying us $8.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, we expanded it to robe making and corn grinding and starting a fire with flint and steel, and we made it a frontier experience where the kids could saw wood, heat water in a kettle, wash clothes, hang them on a line, peel apples, core them.
And then you started doing enough that you were able to stop doing insurance, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then for you guys, it just took off at Rayleigh's, right? With the tours? Or did
Well, I
it
don't know
take a while?
about it took taking off. It was mostly just a lot of work, sort of the same stories now. But we worked, we'd gotten out of school, and so your mom and I worked different jobs so that whatever we made on the bigger farm, the now expanded farm with Grandma and Grandpa's piece, so we could keep all the money, operating money, in the fund. So I was doing construction on the side. First year I bucked hay, then I did construction, and then I substitute taught.
Wow.
So I'd do that 3 days a week, and I'd work on the farm 4 days a week or more. So it was pretty constant.
And Mom was doing waitressing at the time, right?
Mom was doing waitressing, and she also taught at a Christian school for a year down in Banning.
Wow.
Yeah. And then basically we didn't have you kids for the longest time because we thought we can't handle it because we're working all the time. So we'd work in the mornings, and then we'd stop in the afternoon. We'd start pruning trees, and then we'd work all weekend. We'd do gigs on the weekend, and we'd go back to doing our other schedule. So we could keep whatever funds that revenues were made on the farm, we could invest back in. So we did that. We didn't actually take any income from it for the first 7 years we operated.
And you guys were like operating with horse and plow because you couldn't afford a tractor at the time, right?
Right.
Wow.
But the dancing was a big part of it.
It was. It was huge.
The hoedowns were the feature entertainment, and then the singing would revolve around that. But lots and lots of dances.
You guys had tons of churches and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Come up?
A lot of church groups, a lot of couples dances, family parties. You know.
In Calvary Chapels, there was a ton of them there.
We did.
Right?
We did probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 Calvary Chapel groups a year.
Wow.
At least.
And that really was popular because there wasn't anywhere else to do that in the area, right?
Nobody was doing dances or evening events, and the location was great because everybody always said, this is like the peach orchard from Gettysburg is what they would say.
Oh.
So it's so much like New England or like, you know, Virginia countryside out here that's why they wanted to do them here. Everywhere else they went, it was a park and there'd be picnic tables and barbecues and things like that. And so out here they had room to stretch out.
So then that kind of brings us up, I think, to, what would it be, 2002 when we left?
Yeah, beginning of 2002. Yeah, I've been 15 years at that point. So.
And I had been asked to advise Los Rios. So
Wildlands Conservancy had just bought the property a couple years before.
So that was in 2000, Devin?
Yeah, it was in 2000.
I ran that season and began the U-pick on the north side and the U-pick chestnuts on the north side. And they asked me to come back a few years later, I think it was 2004. They asked if I would come back and do it again, and I said, you need a younger man. It was too much work, and so I said, I'd like to bring Devin and Shelley over and have them look at the place. And so they made their deal together, and it was great, and they just started redoing the kitchen over there.
Right.
And that would have been 2004, right?
It was 2004.
And Mom had just had Grace.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So 2004, we're at Los Rios.
Right. So we operated the south side, and it was huge for us at the time. It was different because we were pretty much an entertainment farm oriented here.
Yeah.
Emphasis on entertainment.
And that was the
And
emphasis
there
on
was,
retail, right?
there it was a different animal because they didn't have any entertainment presence, and it was straight ahead, you know, large scale farming, and lots of, you know, big commercial cider press, big packing line. We didn't have any packing line over here. It was all U-pick over here, and so we had a big learning curve to get up to speed to manage that. You know, and that was always the big place up here in the Glen. It was like Los Rios was the real farm operation up here. Everybody else was smaller, or they were waning. You know, some of the older generation were starting to sell off their chunks of orchard for homes and you know, residential little farm pieces. But Los Rios was still intact. Was still operating. You know, thousands and thousands of trees. So that was a big deal for us.
Well, I never realized how massive it was until I was, like, a couple years back. I was looking for different, like, marketing material inspiration. I was going through that old box of promo stuff you had from, like, the 50s and 60s. And I was like, this was a serious, like, advertising budgets for that time period, you know, where it's like nowadays you can do everything on your computer and it's fast and it's easy and it's cheap. And it was like, back then, the kind of, you know, quadruple fold handouts that they were doing, I'm like, just that alone.
And they were mailing them to people.
Mailing them and going probably like door to door to different places down in town. I was like, they had a massive.
Even when we took over, we were spending $5,000-$6,000 per mailing that we were doing.
I remember doing those mailing parties with Rose and John.
Right, exactly.
Sitting in the cafe. So at Los Rios, the first couple years, it was just seasonal, right? Didn't we close for the first few months of the year?
We closed in the off season. We closed up until about June, and then we'd open up for berry season. Anyway, and then opened up more and more. It's really been in the last 20 years, it seems, that the Glen's become a year-round place.
Yeah,
Other than it was always year-round in the village.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
It's always year-round where you could come up to Laws and Oak Tree Village and so on, but the rest of the orchard's pretty much shut down until the next crop year came along.
We were talking about the generational thing and how it's, you know, 3 generations, and there's all sort of some core things that all make us want to be here, but it's, you know, a unique lifestyle that's not easy, particularly. It's hard, and especially harder for you than it has been for us. But what has drawn you and made you want to stay?
Yeah, the lifestyle.
Okay.
An archaic culture, classic Americana culture.
Yeah.
That we found an opportunity to promote up here. And you can pass on from one generation to the next your values and traditions and customs and culture and all that. And so today, I mean, everything is so personal and atomized that you don't have that phenomenon any longer. There's no longer that custom, I suppose, of a regional familial culture. That it survives on some large ranches in Montana and Wyoming, Colorado and places like that, but it's less and less.
Yeah, that's what I was talking to Julia about earlier, where it's odd because people in this region particularly do not understand a rural lifestyle or a generational lifestyle. And like when I was in 4-H, I'd go back to events in Colorado, and there'd be kids from all over the country, and it was 8 generations of cattle farmers, and they had, oh yeah, we've got 5,000 acres, and that was a small farm in South Dakota, and this is what my great grandpa's been doing, and I'll probably do it. And it was like, to me, that was wild, because out here they'd never heard of that kind of thing, and I don't know if it's just not having the space, if it's like a practical problem where it's like there isn't the space to expand, or if it's just the pioneering spirit that is the West. People always have to move on and move to the next thing, but we're just talking about how it's unique here, but really to the rest of the country it's not all that unique.
People think it's a Disneyland kind of a deal. It isn't. It's a family deal. One night I was one afternoon, it got to be late, and there was 2 fellows making cider down there at the cider press by the water wheel. And we were just starting to finish it up, squeeze it out, and Sharon opened the door in the cabin and said, "Hey, Dennis, wrap it up, it's dinner time."
I remember this.
They looked at me and they said, "What do you mean it's dinner time?" And I said to my wife, she's getting impatient, it's got dinner on the table.
Yeah.
So they said, "You live here?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, we thought you were a corporation."
Yeah, I get that all the time.
Like you're an employee.
Yeah.
And they were just knocked out. They couldn't believe that somebody actually opened their family farm up to the public.
Right.
So that's what I think people desire.
Yeah.
Is, I mean, nothing against Disneyland, but it wasn't made to look like something. It was genuine. It was our family farm.
Right. Yeah, I got the best compliment I think I've ever had, and it was somebody came into Wilshire's. It was the end of the day. Everything's kind of sleepy, and it was in the middle of fall, and it was kind of drizzly outside, and we had the the front porch lights on, and I think it was like Mom and Anna were sitting in the rocking chairs outside, and he came in, and I'm like, "Hey, can I get you a cup of coffee? What do you need?" And he was like, just looking around, and he looked at me, and he was like, "This is like the essence of what Disneyland is trying to create, but because it's not real, you can soulishly understand that it's not real." And he's like, "This is the real version of what Disneyland's trying to create for their customers." And I was like, that's the greatest compliment ever, because Disneyland has mastered the aesthetic of an older world lifestyle, and we're actually
Main
living
Street.
it. Yeah, the Main Street USA feeling. It's like, this is what they want, the Gibson Girl look to be, but you're actually it.
Yeah, I hope it continues.
Yeah.
That's the hope, that we don't lose that
Yeah.
that archaic culture.
Yeah.
So it's on you, kiddo,
Great.
and your brother and sisters, and
What I was gonna
next
say-
generation.
But I like being with my family,
Right.
and unless we all move together, I'll just stand right here.
Yeah.
So I may take trips here and there, but always come back home.
Yeah.
Well, hope I didn't say anything out of line.
We're gonna highlight it and underline it when you said something.
I'm always putting my foot in my mouth,
I didn't clean up and